Hi, welcome to another episode of Tech Talk. I am your host, Jeff Hutzell, Chief Cloud Officer with Auditmacs. So Tech Talk is a show where we look at the best and brightest in technology. So people that are doing some amazing things out there in the industry and some of the trends that you'll see on the radar for the next coming years. Today, we're very lucky to have our guest, Matthew Parks. Matthew is the Director of Information Systems from PACE Center for Girls. So Matthew, thanks for joining us.
Appreciate that. Thank you so much.
So if you could tell folks that may not be familiar a little bit more about PACE Center for Girls, kind of what's your mission and what you guys do?
Well, PACE Center for Girls is we're a nonprofit that's based in Jacksonville. We have 21 locations around the state of Florida. We just opened our first location out of the state in the state of in the city of Macon. Mm-hmm. So that goes live, I believe, at the end of the month. And so what we do is we take basically help at-risk girls reach their potential. Some of them have had different or various types of trauma of their lives, and it impacts them both academically and impacts them socially. So we basically get them together, put the pieces together and try to mainstream them back into society.
Yeah, that's great.
That's the short of it.
It's a pretty solid mission. I mean, so from your perspective and your role, how do you guys use technology?
Well, the technology has been a game changer for us. When I first started, I mean, we really were in a place where we were putting out fires every day. And with at the time 17 locations, we were calling long distance to each other, for example. Right. So being able to make our company, even though it's spread out throughout the state, smaller by having collaborative communication with each other, being able to quickly expedite our initiatives and our goals, mm-hmm. being able to track our projects in a cross-collaborative way across the organization has really been a big benefit for us.
That's great. So you're obviously pretty passionate about this. I know you're a teacher as well. Mm-hmm. You do some other interesting things. I mean, right. how did you get started in technology? You know,
and I always tell people that I didn't actually choose technology. It chose me. Mm-hmm. I had a lot of interest, as you mentioned, but technology really was the thing I seemed to have the deepest acumen for, and it also seemed to be the thing that had the most availability as far as the job market.
Sure.
So as I meshed those two things together, it really worked out well. Where I really feel like I go to work every day doing work, but technology, because I'm doing something I love, that at the end of it, it's almost like I'm getting paid to do a hobby. A very high-end hobby.
Anytime you can do what you love and there's demand for it is always nice.
Yeah, it's always good.
I mean, and we talked a lot about new technologies that are coming out, things that are emerging. I know one of the things you're passionate about is AI.
Yeah.
Something that's kind of on the forefront a little bit. Maybe talk about that a little bit and kind of what that means to you.
Well, the biggest thing for me is that being African American and watching that technology is no longer on the periphery. Sure. Technology is actually becoming more of the ambient technology is what we're looking at, to where before, we had the progression of technology in the workplace and technology in the home, and now we have the mobile technology we take with us. Now it's ambient, it's everywhere. Right. It's in your car, you walk in your house responds to you, you mm-hmm. can tell the lights to dim and such. And because of that, that takes a lot of data that we opt in for. So the problems that I see moving forward is that technology, the representation of the society as a whole needs to be inclusive in the development of the technology, or certain groups will be left behind.
Sure, for a number of different reasons. I mean, obviously from a leadership standpoint, you want diversity of thought, diversity of opinion and background and things like that.
Right.
But even more so from just a general use practice, I think is kind of what you're more getting at.
Being a perspective of, for law enforcement, for example, they're starting to use facial recognition, and minorities have a higher, part of the reason why minorities have a higher false positive rate is because we have a data set that's not as inclusive as it could be. So because of that, it's becoming a life and death situation where people have been misidentified, they've been detained. We've had a situation in Louisiana where a gentleman was detained in front of his home, and it escalated.
Sure.
And because of that, there was a hand on a gun when a supervisor came in and looked and said, hey, it's not the same guy, but the computer said it was the same guy.
Right.
So just having that, part of that is, I don't necessarily chalk it up to a racist thing. I think it's more of social inclusion, where we have an implicit bias. African Americans make up 2% of technology in general. And that's according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So it's not something you make up.
So how do we address that? So we just had another guest on the show, Melissa Fulmer-Hardwick from Acosta.
Right.
She talked about the diversity from a female perspective mm-hmm. and how important that is. And obviously, from your perspective, how do we go about changing those things?
There's a couple things. One of the things is exposure. I think exposing young minorities, women, to technology at a younger age, the possibilities of technology, demystifying it some at earlier ages, I think is very important. One of the pieces that Code.org, excuse me, one of their research shows is that the middle school gap is where a lot of women and minorities are being left behind because schools aren't funded at the same rate as they are at elementary and in high school. It's more or less, middle school is a holding place for children.
Those are pretty formative years too, right?
And very formative, yeah. So that's one way. The other thing is on the other side is having support for people who come into the industry. Minorities and women typically enter at the same rate as white male counterparts, Asian counterparts in the industry, but they wash out sooner in the industry once they get into the job market. And part of that, the research shows, is because there's a lack of support at that once they are employed. So I think that's part of it, is trying to within the community and within society at large, is trying to support that lattice that will give them what they need.
I know you've been a great mentor. Obviously, you're very involved in the community here in a bunch of different ways, and obviously the mission you guys have through PACE as well. So it's fantastic. We're certainly glad to have you aboard and glad to see you here. I know you're an active part of the community, so that's terrific. I mean, where can folks find out more about you? So if they want to learn more about you, maybe somebody's watching this that has some questions about how they can get started in IT, where they can look to hear more.
Well, PACE Center for Girls, pacecenter.org is the name of our website, and there we can give you information about any of the 21 centers that's closest to you, whether it be here in Jacksonville or anywhere across the state of Florida and now in Macon. You can reach out, and anyone will be able to help you, whether you want to donate, you want to volunteer time, you want to volunteer services, or you just looking to help in any other type of way. We'll be glad to receive your help.
That's great. Matthew, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it. And thank you guys for joining us as well. And we'll see you on the next episode.